In a small village set between parched land and a vast open sky, an ancient stone well stood quietly at the center of the community. This well was the only source of water that sustained the entire village. Every morning, women carrying clay jars lined up to collect water. Children stood nearby, laughing and chatting, and the elderly sat close by discussing the weather and the harvest. The well did not belong to any one person. It was shared by everyone in the village. Every family depended on this precious source of water for daily life and for caring for their fields and gardens. In that village lived a man named Akash. On the surface, he seemed to have a fairly comfortable life with a sturdy house, healthy livestock, and a wide field. But deep inside, he was driven by a desire that never felt satisfied. Akash was not a poor man at all. He had a solid home, strong animals, and enough land to provide for his family. From the outside, many people in the village thought he was fortunate. But inside Akash's heart, there was a constant feeling of lack that never went away. Whenever he saw a neighbor's field greener than his own, he felt irritated. When someone bought more livestock or had a better harvest, he immediately wanted to have even more than they did. To Akash, life was not about sharing or peace. It was more like an endless competition. He always believed that if someone else had something good, then he had to have even more. Little by little, that way of thinking allowed greed to grow inside him without him even realizing it. One night when the entire village had fallen asleep and the moon hung quietly in the sky, Akash silently stepped out of his house. He walked straight to the stone well at the center of the village. After looking around to make sure no one was there, he slowly pulled up bucket after bucket of water and carried it back to his field to irrigate his crops. In his mind, he reassured himself that he was only taking a little and that surely no one would notice. That night, Akash's field received far more water than usual, while the water level in the well quietly dropped. The small act seemed to go unseen by anyone, but from that very moment, things had already begun to change. Akash did not realize that every action in life leaves a trace. And sometimes, the things we believe are the most secret become the very beginning of the law of cause and effect, something no one can escape. At first, no one in the village noticed anything unusual. But as the hot days continued, the water level in the well began to drop faster than before. Every morning, the line of people waiting to collect water grew longer. Some women had to return home with their clay jars only half full. Children were reminded to save every single drop of water. The entire village began to worry that there might be no rain that year. People gathered around the well, talking among themselves, with anxious expressions on their faces. Something did not feel right, but no one yet knew the true reason behind the sudden change. In that worried crowd, Akash also stood there, pretending to be concerned like everyone else. He shook his head and suggested that perhaps the whole village needed to pray more. But when night fell and everyone went to sleep, Akash quietly returned to the well once again, pulling up bucket after bucket of water and carrying it back to his field. One day, an elderly widow named Lakshmi Devi came to Akash's door. She lived alone with her young grandson after her son had passed away many years earlier. Life had always been difficult for her, and that day she looked even more exhausted than usual. In a soft voice, she explained that her grandson had a fever and the well had run dry before it was her turn to collect water. She only asked for a little water so she could take care of the child. Behind Akash's house were large jars filled with water he had secretly taken from the well during the night. For a brief moment, his conscience wavered, but then he thought about his own field and coldly told her that he had no water to give. The old woman quietly turned and walked away. Sometimes the small choices that seem unimportant become the very seeds of consequences that return later in life. Eventually, what the villagers feared most finally happened. After many weeks of relentless heat, the village's old well ran completely dry. It was no longer just low or weak. There was no water left at all. When people looked down into the well, they saw only dry stones and dusty earth. Silence and worry spread across the entire village. The elders gathered beneath the large tree near the center of the village to discuss what should be done next. The villagers gathered around the well to discuss what should be done. After a long and heavy discussion, the elders finally reached a difficult decision. The entire village would work together to dig a new well in another location, hoping that there was still water hidden beneath the earth. If they found water, the village could continue to survive. But if they failed, the future of everyone in the village would become extremely uncertain. The next morning, the entire community began preparing to dig the new well, clinging to their final hope. At sunrise the following day, the whole village gathered at the new location to begin digging. Men, women, and even young boys arrived carrying shovels, hoes, and baskets for hauling soil. Under the harsh sun, they took turns digging deeper into the ground, hoping to discover a new water source. Many people's hands soon became blistered, and sweat ran down their faces, but no one wanted to give up. Everyone understood that this well would determine the survival of the entire village. Akash was there among the workers as well, but he moved slowly and spoke far less than usual. He avoided looking into people's eyes and stayed away from the conversations happening around him. Deep inside, he knew that the hardship the village was now suffering was connected to his own actions. The feeling of guilt slowly began to grow inside his heart. One morning, Akash walked out to his field, as he always did. As usual, Akash walked out to his field, but the moment he saw the scene before him, his heart suddenly sank. The rows of crops that had once been the greenest in the entire village were now dry and withered. The leaves had turned brown, the soil was cracked, and signs of disease had spread across the land. When he stepped deeper into the field, he noticed that insects had destroyed the roots and mold had spread across the stems. The harvest he had once been so proud of had now become nothing more than a silent, lifeless field. In desperation, Akash ran to the back of his house where he had stored the large jars of water he had secretly taken from the well. But when he opened the lids, a foul smell rushed out. The water inside had rotted and was filled with worms. At that moment, he finally understood that every action carries consequences. This was a life lesson that life never ignores. In that moment, Akash fell to his knees in the middle of the dry field, his heart heavy with regret. He began to understand that nothing in life happens by accident. What was happening to him now was the result of the choices he once believed no one would ever discover. He had taken the village's water out of greed, lied to hide the truth, and turned his back on a woman who desperately needed help. Now all of those actions had returned to him in another form. There was no thunder, no public punishment, only quiet but powerful consequences. Akash realized that sometimes life does not need to punish us. It simply allows our own actions to return to us. And only then do people truly understand the value of doing what is right. While Akash was drowning in regret and despair, the villagers refused to give up. After their first attempt to dig a well failed, they decided to try once more in the same place, but this time they would dig deeper. Under the scorching sun, everyone continued working with the fragile hope that the earth might still hold some water for them. Layer after layer of dry soil was dug up, and basket after basket of dirt was carried away. Many people were beginning to feel exhausted, but no one wanted to stop. Then suddenly one of the men digging the well shouted when he felt the soil beneath his feet becoming damp. Everyone immediately began digging faster. Within minutes, water suddenly burst up from the ground. Clear, cool, and abundant, the water left everyone standing in stunned silence. Some people began to cry, while others lifted their eyes to the sky, in quiet gratitude, thankful that the village had finally been saved. A few days after the village found its new water source, Akash made the most difficult decision of his life. He slowly walked to the place where everyone had gathered around the new well. His face looked tired and filled with regret. Standing before the silent crowd, Akash finally began to speak. Trembling, Akash confessed that it was he who had secretly taken water from the old well on many nights. He admitted that because of his greed, he had lied and caused the entire village to suffer. After speaking the truth, Akash lowered his head in shame, waiting for the anger of the villagers. But after a long silence, an elderly man stepped forward and said that Akash had already paid the price for his actions. He reminded everyone that if people wish to be forgiven, they must also learn how to forgive others. He gently added that this was a reminder of the law of cause and effect, a lesson that life never stops teaching. After hearing Akash's confession, the atmosphere in the village became very quiet. Many people felt angry as they remembered the difficult days when they had to save every drop of water, when their children were thirsty, and everyone feared for the future. Yet when they looked at Akash now, they saw a completely different man. He was no longer the confident and proud man he had once been. Instead, he was someone who had been deeply humbled by the consequences of his own actions. One of the elders stepped forward again and said that sometimes life has already punished a person enough. He reminded everyone that if they hope to receive forgiveness from God for their own mistakes, they must also learn to forgive others. After another moment of silence, one by one, the villagers slowly nodded in agreement. After the villagers decided to forgive him, the tense atmosphere slowly softened. One person brought Akash a cup of clean water from the new well, while another offered him some food. No one scolded him or tried to embarrass him further. Their quiet kindness and compassion moved Akash deeply. He could not hold back his tears when he realized that he had just been forgiven by the very people he had once harmed. That moment changed Akash from deep within. He began to understand that life is not about trying to take more than others, but about living with integrity and caring for the community. From that day on, Akash began to live differently. He worked hard, helped others more often, and tried to repair the mistakes of his past. Not because he wanted praise, but because he sincerely wanted to become a better person. The story ends with a meaningful message that everyone can reflect on. In life, no action truly disappears. Everything we do, no matter how small, leaves a trace and will one day return to us. Kindness, sincerity, and helping others bring peace and blessings. On the other hand, selfishness, greed, and dishonesty will eventually create consequences. Akash learned that lesson through his own painful experience. Yet, by recognizing his mistakes and choosing to change, he was able to find peace again in his life. That is why each of us should be mindful of the seeds we plant in this world, because life is always the most honest mirror of our actions.